Specialist Lena Carter had a reputation at Forward Operating Base, ironclad, though not the kind that raised eyebrows. She was just the quiet medic in the canvas-sided tent next to the helipad. Every soldier knew her face, but few remembered her name. She moved like a shadow between the wounded, gentle hands and focused eyes. Her uniform always clean, her boots always laced just right. Some called her Angel, others Doc, but most simply referred to her as the med tent girl. She didn't talk much, and when she did, it was only about blood loss, pulse rates, or stitches. Lena liked it that way. She spent most of her time organizing supplies, inventorying medicine, or rehearsing field triage protocols in her head. The tent was always hot, sometimes smelling of sweat, disinfectant, or the copper tank of fresh blood. She didn't mind. When medevac helicopters landed, rotors chopping the dry Afghan air, she was already moving, mask on, gloves up, eyes steady. The others assumed she was just well-trained, efficient, maybe even a little obsessive. They didn't know what she carried in her silence. Every now and then, someone would notice something strange. Like the way Lena flinched not from explosions, but from the mechanical sound of a bolt sliding into place on an M4, or how she never turned her back to the entrance of the tent. One soldier joked she must have been infantry in a past life. Another swore she had the posture of a sniper. Nobody pressed her. Medics came and went, but Lena stayed. Quiet, skilled, alone. Private Ellis, a fresh recruit from Kentucky, once tried chatting her up while waiting for a bandage on his sprained ankle. "So, Doc?" he asked casually. "What did you do before all this?" She rapped his foot with firm, efficient pressure. "I treated gunshot wounds. Yeah, in training." She didn't look up. "In Syria?" Ellis blinked. He chuckled, thinking she was kidding, but her face was carved from granite. "Right, Syria," he muttered. Cool word, drifted, but it never went far. FOB Ironclad wasn't the kind of place where soldiers spent time on mysteries. There were IEDs, sniper fire, long nights of watch duty, and dusty heat that melted skin under armor. Nobody thought much about Lena. She was part of the base furniture, reliable, unremarkable, always there until the orders changed. One brutal afternoon, a patrol was set to escort supply vehicles through Red Ridge Passer route, known for ambushes and narrow exposed terrain. The regular field medic assigned to the squad came down with heatstroke an hour before deployment. Backup wasn't available. Command needed a replacement. Lena, who had been standing quietly in the background during the briefing, raised her hand. "I'll go," she said. The room went still. The lieutenant squinted at her. "You field rated?" "Yes, sir." "You sure you're up for it?" "I've done it before." Something in her tone made the lieutenant pause. After a long look, he nodded. "All right, get your gear. We move in 15. That was the first time most of the squad had ever seen Lena outside the tent. She wore body armor like it was molded to her, rifle slung casually across her shoulder, sidearms strapped at the hip with precision. No hesitation, no nerves. She moved with the kind of confidence that wasn't learned in textbooks or training manuals. It came from something older, something real. Specialist Ramos, the squad's communications tech, leaned over to Corporal Jenkins as they loaded up. "What's MedTent Girl doing with us?" Jenkins shrugged. "I guess we're short. Hope she knows what she's doing. She bandaged my leg last month. Did a clean job. Yeah, but bandaging ain't fighting." Lena didn't respond to the chatter. She sat near the back of the Humvee, hands resting on her rifle, eyes scanning the map. No small talk, no idle nerves. She memorized the route, the terrain, the expected checkpoints. Every movement she made was efficient, compact, quiet. The other soldiers threw glances her way, but she didn't acknowledge them. She was focused, and for reasons they couldn't name, that made them nervous. As the convoy rolled out of the gate, tires kicking up chalky dust, the sun blazed overhead like a furnace. Red Ridge loomed in the distance, bare rock and silence. It had been hit 3 times in 2 months. A known danger zone. The kind of place where men either came back late, or didn't come back at all. Inside the Humvee, The air was thick with sweat and radio static. The lieutenant checked his GPS, barked small orders, made jokes, none of them laughed at. Lena sat unmoved, eyes tracing the ridgeline outside. Her fingers rested loosely near her rifle's stock. No one had ever seen her fire. No one imagined she could. Then a shadow flickered across the canyon edge. Lena's posture shifted. Her right hand locked on the rifle grip. She looked up, not like a medic but like someone who had seen this exact scene before. Jenkins caught the change. "Hey, something wrong?" Lena didn't answer. She leaned forward, squinting at the ridge. Ramos looked too. What's she looking at? Then the first explosion hit. The lead Humvee exploded into a fiery blast, flipping sideways and crashing hard into a boulder. Flames licked the vehicle's underside, black smoke rising like a signal to hell. The sound wasn't just loud, it cracked through the valley like thunder, followed by an eerie silence that lasted exactly 2 seconds. Then came the gunfire. Automatic bursts echoed from the ridge above, short, deliberate. Rounds pinged off armor, slammed into rock, and whizzed just inches from helmets. The convoy had driven right into a textbook L-shaped ambush. The kind insurgents waited weeks to execute. The kind that usually left men in body bags. Contact left, contact left. The lieutenant screamed, but panic had already taken root. The squad spilled from the remaining trucks, diving behind tires and scattered rocks. Radio chatter turned to static. Someone tried to call in coordinates, but their signal was jammed. They were trapped in the canyon. No air support, no backup, no exit plan. Lena hit the ground hard behind a half-buried tire. Dust clouded her vision, but her breathing stayed calm. She peered through the haze and spotted movement up on the ridge, shadows, darting muzzle flashes, pulsing. She counted 4, maybe 5 shooters. Classic triangle formation. She'd seen it before. 20 meters ahead, Private Hensley cried out. He was hit in the thigh and dragging himself behind a rock, blood soaking through his fatigues. Rounds zipped past his boots. Lena moved. She didn't ask permission, didn't wait for cover. She sprinted low and fast, weaving like a ghost through a maze of gunfire. Bullets slammed into the dirt around her, kicking up sand and heat, but none found their mark. When she reached Hensley, she didn't speak. She grabbed his collar and dragged him back, sliding on her knees behind the axle of a truck. "Hold pressure here," she ordered, pressing gauze into his leg. "You're not dying today?" What? He stuttered, wide-eyed. But Lena was already moving again. The lieutenant stood near a boulder, shouting into a dead radio. His helmet was askew, a thin line of blood on his neck. When he turned to reposition, a round clipped his shoulder. He fell back, groaning. The unit was falling apart. Corporal Jenkins fired blind toward the ridge, ducked behind the hood of the 3rd Humvee. "We need a medic." "Where the hell is she's already out there," Ramos yelled, pointing. Jenkins turned and froze. Lena was no longer hiding. She was up, rifle aimed, stance solid. Not panicked, not scrambling. She picked a point on the ridge and fired, once, twice, then again. Controlled bursts, clean, deliberate. Her body moved like a machine, shifting with instinct, each shot calculated. Her bullets weren't wild, they were surgical. One insurgent dropped, tumbling down a rock face. Jenkins blinked. No way. She adjusted her position, rolled behind a rock, then came up on the other side, like she'd rehearsed it 100 times. Her boots dug in, her shoulders settled into the rifle. Another shot rang out. Another enemy fell. The soldiers were stunned. "Who is she?" whispered Ramos. Lena slid into a kneel beside the lieutenant. Blood poured from his shoulder, staining his sleeve dark. She pressed down with gauze in one hand and aimed with the other, watching the ridge without missing a beat. "You're hit high," she said. "Clean through. You'll be fine." "You're not a normal medic," he winced. "No sir," she replied. He tried to sit up, but she pushed him back down. "Stay low, I need your rifle." He nodded, giving her the weapon without question. Across the canyon, the enemy fire slowed. 2 had gone quiet. The others shifted their positions. Lena watched for the next move. This was the part where most squads panicked again when the shock wore off and desperation crept in. She couldn't let that happen. She tapped her cum, but it was still scrambled. They had to survive long enough for signal to return. Lena waved Ramos over. I need suppressing fire along that ridge. Left side, 10-second bursts. Count it. Got it, he replied, snapping out of his daze. Jenkins, right flank. If they move, drop them. No hesitation. What are you? Focused, she said. They followed her. No rank, no briefing, just trust born in chaos. Lena vaulted over a tire and slid next to the second truck. From there, she could see a side trail up the canyon wall. She slung the second rifle across her back, adjusted her sidearm, and ran. Bullets chased her shadow. But she didn't slow. She scrambled up the side path, boots gripping loose gravel, heart pounding steady. From a higher angle, she spotted the last shooter behind a crumbling stone ledge. He was reloading, unaware. Lena raised her rifle. One shot. Clean. When she reached the top of the trail. She scanned the ridge again, clear back. Below the convoy was quiet. Smoke still curled from the lead vehicle, but the gunfire had stopped. Ramos stood, rifle up, eyes searching. Lena whistled once, short and sharp. They turned. Relief hit their faces like sunrise. She walked back down, boots coated in dust, expression unreadable. The firefight was over, and the men who had called her just a medic now looked at her like something else entirely. A ghost from war. A guardian in silence, and not one of them ever forgot that moment. The smoke still hung in the canyon when the backup patrol arrived. Dust kicked up as two armored vehicles rolled through the pass, weapons aimed high and alert. But there was no more fighting. Only the remains of the ambush, burnt metal, blood on rock, shell casings scattered like fallen leaves. The first responder stepped out, scanning the area. Then he froze. Specialist Lena Carter stood near the second Humvee, checking the pulse of a downed insurgent. Her rifle was slung, gloves blood-stained, uniform torn at the elbow. She looked up only briefly before returning to the body in front of her. He's gone, she said calmly. Staff Sergeant McAllister approached, confused. Who took control here? She stood up slowly. I did. You're the medic. Yes. Sergeant. He looked around at the wounded being treated, the enemy dead carefully marked, and the remaining squad alive and watching her like loyal shadows. Jenkins stepped forward. She saved every one of us. Pulled Hensley out of the line of fire, patched him mid-battle, took out 4 tangos on her own. McAllister raised an eyebrow. 4, at least, Ramos added, maybe more. She moved like Delta. Lena's eyes narrowed slightly. We should evac the injured before this place draws attention again. McAllister didn't argue. He just gave her a long look and gestured toward the trucks. Load them up. As the convoy returned to base, Lena rode in silence, sitting beside the unconscious lieutenant. Her hands rested on her lap, bandaged knuckles throbbing. Across from her, Jenkins and Ramos stared like they had never seen her before. Because they hadn't, not really. They had seen a medic, a quiet girl, in a clean uniform. Someone soft, someone useful in a crisis, maybe. But now, they saw something else entirely. Jenkins leaned forward. That wasn't your first ambush, was it? No, she replied without blinking. You trained for that kind of thing. Yes, where? She looked at him, gaze hard. As steel, where it doesn't matter anymore. He sat back, unsure whether to respect her or fear her. Maybe both. When they reached the base, Lena jumped down first. She helped unload the wounded, gave orders to the waiting medics, and filed a brief after-action report with cold, clinical precision. No emotion, no flash. The commanding officer, Colonel Marsh, summoned her that evening. She stood at attention. In his office, while he read from a tablet, the room was quiet except for the buzz of a ceiling fan and the occasional tap of his finger scrolling. This is an impressive account. Specialist. Yes, sir. He put the tablet down and folded his hands. I had to dig into your record. I assumed you would. He raised an eyebrow. Delta Force selection. Completed advanced field tactics. Specialized in counter-sniper recon. Transferred out after a classified incident in Syria. No disciplinary marks. No commendations, just silence. Lena didn't respond. The colonel leaned forward. Why leave that world behind? Her answer came soft but steady. Some of us don't get to leave. I just changed uniforms. Why hide it? I didn't hide. I did what was asked. I patched wounds. I followed orders. You didn't follow orders today. She stared directly at him. No one else was going to bring them back alive. He held her gaze for a long moment. Then he nodded. You'll be debriefed. Intel wants your report on enemy positions. But off the record, ... double quotes, he paused. You saved 6 men. That's not something we forget. I didn't do it for thanks. I believe you. Lena saluted and turned to leave. Before she reached the door, he called out again. You're not just a medic, Carter. You're something a hell of a lot more valuable. I'm still a soldier, sir. She stepped out, leaving the colonel with a screen full of redacted history and 1,000 unanswered questions. Outside, the sun had dipped below the hills. The air was cooler, filled with the hum of distant generators and the quiet shuffle of boots on gravel. Lena returned to the medical tent and resumed her duties like nothing had changed. She replaced 4 bags, checked vitals, and recorded treatment logs, but everything had changed. The soldiers who once ignored her now watched her with different eyes. Some nodded as she passed. Others whispered stories about the ridge, the shots she landed, the way she moved without fear. One private swore she never even blinked during the firefight. They didn't call her Med-Tent Girl anymore. They called her Carter. Some called her Ma'am. Rumors spread quickly, not just across her unit, but to other platoons, other sectors. Who was she? What was she? A medic with sniper skills? A ghost from some secret team? Was she placed there to observe? Or was she hiding from something? Lena ignored it all. At night, she sat alone on the cot in the supply tent, wiping down her sidearm, eyes lost in thought. Her dog tags clinked softly as she leaned forward, elbows on her knees. In her bag, beneath the spare bandages and burn cream, was an old patch-faded black, with a silver dagger. She hadn't worn it in years. She never meant to wear it again. But war had a way of waking up the parts of a soldier they tried hardest to bury, and Red Ridge Pass had just ripped the lid off hers. The days after Red Ridge Pass moved strangely. Nothing felt normal anymore, not for Lena, and certainly not for the men who had seen her fight. Around base, soldiers watched her differently now. Where they used to nod politely or ignore her presence entirely, now they stood aside when she walked by. She wasn't just the medic anymore. Something had shifted. Ramos even began calling her chief in passing. She never corrected him. Inside the medical tent, her routine didn't change. She still wrapped burns, checked vitals, monitored hydration levels. But when she moved, other medics watched her for cues. Her composure under fire hadn't just earned respect, had rewritten the hierarchy inside that tent. One afternoon, Specialist Dana Monroe, who had only been on base for 2 weeks, approached her in the supply room. I heard what you did, up in the pass, Monroe said, carefully stacking bandages. Did you really take down 4 shooters? Lena glanced over without stopping her inventory. 5. Monroe hesitated. I didn't know medics got that kind of training. They don't, Lena said simply. Monroe looked down, unsure what to say next. Lena added, you'll hear things. Just do your job. Learn fast. You won't have time to be scared when it matters. Monroe nodded, more serious than before. That night, Colonel Marsh called Lena in for a classified debrief. The room was small, just a desk, a wall map of Kandahar province, and 2 laptops humming quietly. 2 plainclothes men from Intel were already seated when she arrived. They didn't introduce themselves. Tell us about the ridge, one said, flipping open a small notebook. Lena gave them coordinates, estimated weapon types, even behavioral patterns of the enemy fire team. She described how they took high ground, but didn't use full suppressive coverage. Amateurs imitating professionals. She noted they had crude radio jamming, likely bought off the black market. Not military grade. The men asked how she spotted the flank route. I remembered it from a failed recon sweep we attempted in 2018. She replied. That drew glances between them. The older man leaned forward. You were in country then. Lena's eyes met his. Briefly. They didn't push. After 20 minutes, she was dismissed. One of the intel officers followed her into the hallway. You ever think about reactivating? He asked, walking beside her. No, she replied. You could do more than stitching up grunts and fixing sprains. I am doing more, he smirked. You were one of the best, Carter. They still talk about what you pulled off in Tal Afar. Don't. He slowed, watching her walk ahead. You might have left it behind, but the war never left you. She didn't look back. 2 nights later, an explosion rocked the base. It wasn't an ambush or airstrike. It was a supply truck that had been rigged with explosives parked just outside the west gate. No one saw it coming, screams echoed. Black smoke billowed into the sky as sirens wailed. Lena was one of the first responders. She sprinted through dust and debris, triaging burns, applying pressure to wounds, and calling out for stretchers. Her voice cut through the chaos like a combat. Commander. Inside the flames, a young soldier was pinned under a section of the blast wall. It was too hot to touch, too dangerous to wait for machinery. Without hesitation. Lena yanked off her vest, wrapped her hands in gauze, and grabbed the edge of the debris. Help me lift. She barked to a nearby corporal. They heaved together. Metal. Groaned. The soldier screamed. One more push and she pulled him out, rolling him onto a blanket as medics rushed in. Blood smeared her arms. Ash blackened her face, and her breath came in short bursts. But her eyes were steady. Her hands didn't shake. That rescue earned her more than a nod of respect. It made her a symbol. The next morning, a group of junior soldiers waited outside the medical tent, not for treatment, but to ask questions. How do you stay calm under fire? What do you look for before shooting? How do you not freeze? When people are screaming. Lena paused. She hadn't trained anyone in years. She didn't miss it. She didn't think she needed it. But something inside her shifted. She grabbed a whiteboard from the tent wall, dragged it outside, and began sketching out a basic battlefield trauma map. She spoke in clipped direct terms. First, check your own cover, then airway, bleeding, circulation. If you skip sequence, you risk the entire evac. The soldiers listened like it was gospel. Within 2 weeks, word spread. She was running unofficial combat clinics behind the gym tent. What started with 4 soldiers turned into 15, then 20. Even hardened NCOs started showing up. Lena didn't talk about her past. She didn't need to. Her presence spoke loud enough. When Sergeant Major Dawes visited her session, he stood silently in the back. Afterward, he approached her. You ever consider putting that training to work again officially? Lena replied, not interested in rank or medals, just results. He grinned. That's exactly the kind of answer I hoped for. She returned to her tent that night, exhausted. She sat on the edge of her cot, stared at the ceiling, and reached into her bag. From beneath the gauze and antiseptic packets, she pulled out the faded black patch with the silver dagger. She held it in her hand for a long time. The girl who tried to leave behind that life was gone. In her place stood a soldier forged by fire, scarred by silence, and finally, quietly awake again. Lena Carter walked differently now. She didn't mean to, but she did. Not with arrogance, just certainty. She no longer blended into the background like she once had. Even without stripes on her sleeve, soldiers gave her the kind of respect reserved for officers who'd bled with them. Her quiet had taken on weight. Her lessons behind the gym tent became a daily routine. Everyone from infantry to engineers came to learn how to move under fire, treat battlefield wounds, or steady their hands when everything around them collapsed. She never yelled. She never needed to. Her presence commanded more than any barked order ever could. The classes were short, sharp, and filled with truths no handbook could teach. If you're scared, good, she told them. Fear makes you sharp, but panic kills. They listened, not because they had to but because she was living proof that what she taught worked. Still, despite her growing influence, Lena remained a ghost off duty. She ate late, alone. Slept. Little, spoke only when needed. Some called her mysterious. Others called her dangerous. But no one dared challenge her anymore, except for one man. Master Sergeant Ben Hartley had served 18 years and fought in 3 theaters. He wasn't impressed by rumors, and he didn't believe in shadows. She's a medic, he muttered to his team as they loaded gear. She got lucky. Happens sometimes. But when his squad lost 2 men in a night ambush north of Sector 6, it was Lena who arrived on scene first. She treated his wounded under sniper fire, dragged a bleeding private into cover, and returned fire when Hartley's own weapon jammed. Afterward, he pulled her aside. "You're not just a medic," he said finally, conceding what the rest already knew. "No," she replied, "but I'm still here to save lives." That was the thing about Lena. Even with every kill confirmed, even with lives saved and enemies dropped, her core remained the same. She didn't chase glory, she didn't want power, she wanted to stop people from dying. That was her war. And yet, part of her couldn't ignore the truth. She was different now, something had cracked open since Red Ridge, something she thought she buried. Back in her tent, after lights out, she found herself reliving old missions. The screams, the smoke, the taste of grit in her teeth. She saw the face of Sergeant Mendez, her teammate in Syria moments before his vehicle hit the IED. She heard herself screaming into a cum that no one ever answered. The night terrors returned quietly. She never told anyone. The only one who ever suspected was Colonel Marsh. He saw the change in her posture, the distance in her eyes during morning briefings. One evening, he caught her on the edge of the helipad, staring into the mountains. "You okay, specialist?" Lena didn't turn. "I'm fine, sir, I know that look. I wore it for 2 years after Baghdad." She remained silent. "You think because you're saving lives now, the past doesn't count? That you've traded one war for another? I just do my job. And when the job's over," he asked. "I don't plan that far ahead." He studied her a moment longer, then handed her a small black case. She opened it and frowned. Inside was a challenge coin with the 5th Special Forces Group crest, the same unit she'd trained with long ago. "Why?" she asked. "Because no matter where they send you, people like you never stop fighting. You just pick new battles." She closed the box gently. "I didn't come here to be remembered." He nodded. "That's exactly why you will be." A week later, orders came in for a high-risk mission near the Pakistan border. A joint team was needed to secure a suspected weapons cache inside a cave complex. Volunteers only. Extraction window tight, no air cover, hostiles expected. Squad was tapped for it, so was Ramos. And Jenkins. Lena requested to go. Command hesitated at first, but ultimately, they didn't argue. She was no longer just a medic. She was the plan's insurance policy. Before dawn, they moved out in silence. No fanfare, just rifles, vests, and quiet determination. Inside the convoy, Ramos sat beside her. "You ever think about going back?" he asked, "to Delta?" He nodded. Lena stared ahead through the windshield. "I never really left." Ramos laughed lightly. "That's what I figured." The drive was long and tense. As the trucks neared the drop zone, Lena checked her sidearm, then removed her medic patch and slid it into her vest pocket. "I'm not here to patch holes this time," she said. "You sure about that?" Ramos asked. She glanced at him. "Here to make sure we don't need patches at all." The mountains loomed ahead, dark and silent. The mission was minutes from unfolding, and while the others adjusted scopes and tightened straps, Lena Carter leaned into the storm with a heart sharpened by years of silence, loss, and survival. They had thought she was just a medic. But soon, another truth would unfold, one that even she hadn't fully accepted yet. The insertion point was a narrow ravine to clicks south of the cave system. The team dismounted in silence, weapons ready, boots crunching against dry shale. The pre-dawn chill cut through their gear, but no one complained. They moved like ghosts. Between the rocks 12 soldiers trained for war, but only one among them had danced with death long enough to stop fearing it. Lena took point. It wasn't her assigned role. She wasn't the squad leader, nor the ranking NCO. But when she moved, they followed. Her instincts guided their direction. Her hand signals dictated their silence. No one questioned it. She'd been here before, not this exact terrain, but others like it, places with no light, no backup, and no mercy. Syria, Mali, northern Iraq, places where names didn't matter and records disappeared. Ahead, the entrance to the cave yawned like a wound in the cliffside. Two guards stood watch, Kalashnik slung lazily, unaware of the eyes watching them from behind a scope. Two targets, whispered Hartley. Take the left, I've got the right. But Lena didn't raise her rifle. She handed it to Ramos, slid off her vest, and pulled a combat knife from her boot. No shots, she said. Too early, too loud. Hartley blinked. You're going. Lena nodded once. Before he could argue, she vanished into the rock shadows. She moved like the wind, silent, surgical. Sure. In 30 seconds, it was done. The two guards collapsed without a cry, their weapons falling harmlessly beside them. The team moved in seconds later. Dragging the bodies out of sight, Hartley looked at her, eyes full of something between admiration and disbelief. Remind me never to play poker with you. They advanced into the cave, narrow at first, then widening into a twisting tunnel system chiseled by both nature and man. Intel said it had been used during the Soviet War and repurposed by insurgents in recent years. No maps, no comes inside, just steel nerves and blind trust. Inside, the darkness swallowed sound. The walls dripped. The air was damp and heavy. Lena took lead again. She motioned left at a fork. The team followed. 10 paces in, her hand shot up. They froze. She knelt. Examined the floor, barely visible tripwire, nearly invisible in the low light. She disarmed it without a word, using a small folding tool from her sleeve. Ramos leaned in. You sure you weren't IO'd in a past life? I'm sure I was a lot of things, she muttered. They moved deeper, 50 meters in. They found the weapons cache, stacked crates, fresh tracks in the dirt, satellite parts, mortar rounds. It was worse than expected. Evidence pointed to foreign contractors, possibly Russian. Hartley keyed the mic. Package located. Marking for strike, ETA to extraction. Static answered. Dead air. Signal blocked again. Lena stared up at the crude wiring running along the ceiling. Jury-rigged jammers. They'll jam until we're out of range, she said. Let's finish this and move. But nothing ever went that smoothly. Footsteps echoed from the deeper chamber. Lena raised her fist. Lights killed. Weapons up, voices murmured. 2 no, 3 men, all armed. They didn't know the team was there yet. Hartley raised his rifle, but Lena whispered to close to the crates. You fire, we all go up. He cursed under his breath. She looked around, spotted a small crawl space to the right, tight and dark. I'll flank, she said. Give me 20 seconds. Hartley wanted to protest, but something in her voice stopped him. She slipped through the gap, crawling like a panther in silence. Inside the chamber, the men laughed, one lighting a cigarette. The flick of the lighter gave away their exact position. Lena appeared behind them. 3 swift motions. One man dropped with a broken neck. The second crumpled as she drove the hilt of her knife into his throat. The third turned, just in time to see her eyes cold steady before she silenced him. 2. When the team entered seconds later, the fight was already over. Holy hell. Ramos whispered. They marked the crates with beacon flares and prepped charges for detonation. As they headed back toward the entrance, footsteps echoed again, heavier. This time, an enemy patrol. Reinforcements. We don't have time, Hartley said. We're boxed in. Lena grabbed the detonator. Fall back to the second chamber. Take cover behind the rock shelf. What about you? I'll trigger manually. I can reach the fallback point through the outer vent shaft. You'll never make it. She looked at him, dead calm. I've made it from worse. Hartley hesitated, then he nodded. The team retreated. Lena stayed, as the patrol entered. Shouting in a language she understood too well, she crouched behind the crates, timed their steps, waited for the first one to open a box. Then she triggered the charge. The explosion tore through the cave, swallowing the patrol, the munitions, and the jammers in a blast of dust and fire. The team outside braced as heat and smoke burst from the cliff face. Moments later, a figure crawled out of the side shaft, coughing, bleeding from her temple, one sleeve torn, dirt embedded in her knuckles. It was Lena. Alive. The entire team rushed forward. Hartley grabbed her arm and pulled her upright. You're insane, he said. Not yet, she replied, eyes sharp despite the blood. They helped her into the evac vehicle as radio signal returned. Command confirmed. Objective complete. Strike. Package verified. No losses. No one said much during the ride back, but everyone looked at Lena with the same thought in their heads. This wasn't luck. This was something else entirely. Lena sat on the edge of the cot inside the forward operations clinic, her left hand wrapped in gauze and her temple stitched clean. The medical tent was quiet, except for the occasional hum of machines and distant helicopter blades. She could still hear the blast echoing in her skull. The dust, the heat. The brief moment when she thought she wouldn't make it out, but she always did. Across the room, Staff Sergeant Hartley stood with arms crossed, watching her. He hadn't stopped since they returned from the caves. He didn't look at her like the others did. Not with awe, not with confusion. His gaze held something else, calculation. You're not going to ask what that was about, Lena finally said. Hartley shook his head. Already did. She raised an eyebrow. He tossed a file onto her cot, a thin manila envelope. I pulled your transfer record, he said. What wasn't redacted, anyway? Lena didn't touch it, and I found 2 years of complete silence. No hospital assignments. No combat medic training until 2 years ago. And before that, nothing. Maybe it's just lost paperwork. Maybe, or maybe Delta Force blacked you out after Syria. She didn't respond. Her fingers flexed over the edge of the cot. He stepped closer. Why hide it? You clearly know your stuff. The team trusts you. Hell, you saved our asses. Twice. That's exactly why I hid it, she replied. Hartley frowned. She leaned forward, voice low. You know what happens when people find out what you used to be? They stop seeing you as part of the team. You become a myth, a story, then a threat. I wanted to serve again, not be a ghost. Hartley sat across from her, his tone softer. Why leave Delta? Lena's eyes darkened. There was a mission in Syria. Intel was bad. Locals were innocent. Orders were wrong. I called it out. Didn't matter. She exhaled slowly. They pulled me out, called it emotional fatigue. I asked for reclassification. I told them I wanted to treat wounds, not make new ones. They didn't fight it. They just buried everything. Hartley was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he said, You don't belong in the med tent anymore. I never belonged there. But it's the only place they let me stay. Before he could reply, the tent flap flew open, and a corporal burst in. Sir Co wants both of you now. Briefing room. Lena stood, grabbed her jacket, and followed Hartley out. Inside the command tent, a dozen screens showed satellite images, movement paths, and aerial views of the mountains. Colonel Rhodes stood at the center, hands behind his back, eyes locked. On Lena, as she entered, he didn't speak right away. When he did, it wasn't with anger but with curiosity. I thought I had everyone on this base figured out, Rhodes said. Then I get a report, saying my quietest medic infiltrated a weapons den, neutralized 8 hostiles, disarmed a minefield, and walked out of an explosion with a pulse. Lena stood at attention, sir. He walked closer, eyes never leaving. Hers. I pulled your sealed file. You should know, I'm not supposed to have access to it. But after what you pulled off, flags were raised at CENTCOM. You've got some powerful people very interested in you again. Lena's jaw tensed. Let me be clear, Rhodes continued. I don't care what happened in Syria. I don't care why you walked away. What I care about is this. You have a skill set we need, and it's wasted behind a tray of antibiotics. He motioned to the screen. We have another problem. A joint US-Afghan convoy is pinned 50 miles north, terrains too tight for air support, and comes patchy. They need someone who knows how to adapt, lead, and get people out alive. He looked at Hartley. She's going in with your team. Hartley nodded without hesitation. Rhodes turned back to Lena. I'm not ordering you. This is a request. But if you say yes, you're done hiding. Lena didn't hesitate. I'm in. The team geared up in silence. But the atmosphere was different, this time heavier, charged. Ramos walked beside her, adjusting his vest. So, you were like a ninja or something. Lena smirked. Something like that. Behind them, Hartley barked orders. Everyone moved. Faster, sharper. Like the weight of the last mission hadn't worn them down, but sharpened them. The ambush had changed them all, but it had changed Lena most. She wasn't hiding anymore. She was leading in the transport truck, as engines roared. And dust kicked up. Hartley leaned over. Whatever happened in Syria? I get it. She met his eyes. Let's not screw this one up. Wouldn't dream of it, she said. The truck rolled out of the base, cutting through the Afghan dawn. Ahead lay a trapped convoy, rising hostilities, and uncertain terrain. But, for the first time in years, Lena wasn't trying to disappear. She was moving toward the fire on her own terms. The convoy was already smoking by the time Lena and Hartley's team arrived. 2 Humvees were on fire, one flipped onto its side. Scattered gunfire echoed through the narrow valley. Enemy fighters held high ground positions, picking off anyone who moved. Tracer rounds lit up the sky like fireflies gone mad. Lena crouched behind a boulder, scanning the ridgeline with sharp eyes. Ramos, Jenkins, cover fire northwest. Hartley yelled, Lena, you're on me. She nodded and followed him through the debris, dodging shrapnel and ducking low. Her heartbeat was steady. She was in it, now fully in it, and the fear that once haunted her had become something else entirely. Clarity, focus, control. They reached the first overturned truck. 2 soldiers were trapped inside one, unconscious, the other screaming. And pinned by twisted metal, Lena slid under the wreck, her voice calm. You're going to be okay. What's your name? P. Parker, the soldier gasped. I'm going to cut the strap. On 3. Stay with me, Parker. She worked fast, flipping her combat knife from her boot and slicing through harness webbing. Blood soaked her arms, but she didn't flinch. With Hartley's help, she dragged both men clear and signaled Ramos for smoke cover. Moments later, an RPG hit near the rocks, shaking the earth. Dirt rained from above, and a wall of flame rose behind them. Lena didn't blink. She moved against this time toward the ridgeline. What are you doing? Hartley called after her. They'll keep pinning us until someone clears them from above, she said. I'll take the east slope. Give me 3 minutes, then move. You're going alone. I won't be alone for long. She darted through scrub and rock, light on her feet, a shadow against the terrain. Years of special ops training rushed back, not as memory, but instinct. She reached a boulder halfway up the ridge, pulled a smoke grenade, and lobbed it hard toward the enemy position. Then she climbed higher. She moved silently behind enemy lines, counting 6 fighters spread across the ledge. They were laughing, relaxed. One even smoked a cigarette, confident no one could reach them. They didn't see her until it was too late. Lena dropped the first 2 before they even turned. Her knife struck clean, fast, silent, final. The third one tried to raise his rifle, but she slammed him to the ground with a twist of her shoulder and drove the butt of her pistol into his temple. 3 more came at her this time. They fired. Lena dove behind a rock, bullets chipping at the stone. She rolled out and fired twice, 1 shot to the chest, 1 to the thigh. The last fighter turned and tried to run. She didn't chase, she aimed, fired once. Silence returned to the ridge. Below. Hartley's team advanced quickly. The pressure was off. Enemy fire had ceased. They secured the convoy, stabilized the wounded, and radioed for evac. Within minutes, Black Hawks descended in a whirl of dust and thunder. Lena rejoined the team at the base of the ridge, blood on her arms, dust streaking her face, and a torn shoulder strap dangling off her vest. Jenkins just stared. "You cleared." The ridge Lena gave a short nod. "Wasn't that crowded?" Ramos grinned. "Remind me never to piss you off." Back at base, the survivors of the convoy were loaded off, one by one, onto gurneys and stretchers. Some would make it, a few wouldn't. But thanks to Lena, most of them would live. Colonel Rhodes approached her near the field hospital. "You disobeyed my direct strategy." Lena looked him in the eye. "Yes, sir," he nodded. "Good call, you just saved 15 lives." He handed her a folded envelope. "What's this?" "Your new orders." She opened it. Her eyes widened. "Fort Bragg?" she asked. "Joint Special Operations Training Command wants you back. They want you to help shape the next generation. Combat medics, recon units, Suskondrescu. Led the whole program." She hesitated. "I thought they buried me." "They did," he replied. "But sometimes, legends dig themselves out." She folded the paper again and slid it into her vest. "I'll think about it." That night, Lena sat alone on the mess hall rooftop, sipping instant coffee from a chipped mug. The base was quiet. Desert winds howled through the hangars. Distant headlights shimmered like ghosts. Hartley climbed the ladder and joined her without a word. They sat side by side for a long time. "You going to take the orders?" he finally asked. "Maybe. You ever going to stop fighting?" She shook her head. "It's not about the fighting. It's about making sure the ones who fight come home." He nodded slowly. "You're not what I expected. I never was." She stood, stretched her back, and looked out at the dark. "People still call me a medic," she said. "Let them. The only label that matters to me is this someone who was there when it counted." As she walked away, Hartley watched her go. He didn't salute. He didn't speak. He just smiled. Because he finally understood, Lena Carter wasn't just a warfighter, or a healer, or a legend from a classified file. She was something rarer. She was a soldier who'd fought to wars won on the battlefield, and one inside herself, and she had won them both. The end.